Now, your research interests also include, obviously I have to get all these words pronounced correctly, neuroanalytical and neurophysiological substrates of learning and memory, including the effects of alcohol on neural and behavioral function. Given the historical relationship between writers and alcohol, how much literature have we gained or lost because of that? I'm looking at you here, freshman. But I'm curious, when you do research in areas like that, how does it impact the rest of your life? And what kind of research have you done?
I've actually done two different kinds of alcohol-related research. The main line has been on looking at the effects of alcohol that's prenatally exposed, and so in syndromes like prenatal alcohol syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, and the effects that has on the rest of the lifetime of what brain function looks like. And so there are deficits in the brain, of course, due to this early alcohol exposure. So we've spent a lot of time looking at those. They're devastating in cognitive function, as you might imagine. We've done a small amount of work that have more actively looked at the effects of alcohol and genetic predispositions to high alcohol use on cognitive function. And as you might imagine, the studies are very, very clear that alcohol use is not compatible with higher cognition. And in fact, what I worry often is that in binge drinking and when there's very, very high levels of alcohol, that the effects are even more sustained than you see in even moderate alcohol use. So binge drinking in particular has these huge ramifications, as we know, on cognitive processing. And I don't think you do very good writing under those circumstances, no matter who you are.
That hasn't been my experience. No, I'm just kidding, but that has been.
Mine either.
Yeah. So, as somebody who's done a lot of academic writing, what's the best part about being a writer? What do you most enjoy when you sit down to write?
I think it's the process itself. In a lot of respects, I tend to be a little bit different than some people in the way they write. I write in spurts, huge spurts, where I can sit down in a day and a half period or so and write 40 or 50 pages of a scientific paper all at once. And then I tend to, part of that's because of the mode I've been in as an administrator and a researcher for the last several years, where I have to take opportunities when I can, a weekend, a couple of days at holiday breaks, et cetera, to do this. And so I've gotten into this mode of writing huge amounts in a short period of time. And then I set it aside for a period of time, sometimes a couple of months. Get it back out, take another look at it, and then say, oh my God, who wrote this? Often. And then do heavy editing, set it aside, get it back out, and take a look at it again. This has been my mode for several years of writing, and it might be the reason why I like to seek complete things from my co-authors too, because it's almost forcing them into my mode, which probably isn't the best thing to do.
Okay.
But nonetheless, when I have gone through a couple of phases of this pretty intense writing, there's a product there that I'm very, very pleased with. And that getting to that point, and that's what I mean about the process, to me is what I find the most enjoyable out of writing.
Being done with writing.
Yeah, and being accomplished, to have gone from what is this atrocious piece of flurry of writing into something that will be published, either a book chapter or a comprehensive article, is really something I've never lost the excitement about.
I'm curious, when you do sit down to do these really long, these bouts of creating a huge amount of text, are citations part of that? I mean, is this something that you do and you're at the same time that you're doing all the writing, doing all the citing, or is that something that comes in later?
Yeah, not the specifics of the citation, but I generally know where I'm going and what I'm going to insert in those. So I'll put generally in text, put something here from, and then it's later I'll get the specifics. But I have a pretty good memory for literature. in my field, and the ability to, I think, remember who's published what, approximately when, and what these experiments were all about. I always go back and check for accuracy to make sure my memory is good. It usually is, but occasionally I've gotten the wrong paper and the wrong person. But generally, I know the kind of supportive literature I want to cite at that point.
Mm-hmm. What's the most difficult part of writing for you? What's the worst part?
Right now, it's finding the time to do this. It's really a challenge, given for the scientific writing part, because of the number of other things I author that are not in the scientific writing domain. They might be everything from speeches, which is a form of writing in itself. Mm-hmm. It's an oral delivery of something that is created in written form to begin with, to pieces that might appear in educational related places or newspapers, or et cetera, op-ed pieces on higher ed. And so finding that time to write in the science has really been challenging lately.
Okay. What's the best writing job you've had, the one that you look back on and think either a particular piece that you wrote or something, a particular time that you were writing that you thought that's the most enjoyable thing at a time that I've had?
I think it was around 2000 or so. About 10 years ago or so, I published a paper which was probably a summary of my research to date. And you don't get a lot of opportunities to do that when you publish papers, individual papers in research. But it was like a retrospective on the research program to that point. And the reason it was enjoyable for me is because it instantly brought to mind the many, many undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, collaborators that I worked with over the years in generating that set of literature. It was interesting individual experiments that I hadn't thought about in several years. I thought about at that time. And I think that brought up the memories of conducting the research and all of the things that went on in the lab at that time. And so I found that an incredible experience. One other I should note is I just published this year a paper with my postdoctoral mentor. He's a guy by the name of Richard Thompson. I was a postdoc with him at Stanford in the early 80s. And we had published on and off together throughout the last several years, but we just put together a major theoretical and a literature review paper that we published in a journal called Neuroscience that just came out a month or so ago. And it was nice to work with Dick Thompson again, in the sense that I go back over 30 years ago or so. He was in the next step in my education, and I was very fortunate to be able to sort of, when he's nearing the end of his career, able to co-author something with him again. So it was really great fun working with him on a paper that should prove to be interesting when it's read.